What's up, Flannelverse? We are back. It is time for Thursday Night Football. We've got the Steelers at the Browns. Some bad weather here. I just saw just before I started, Kevin Roth actually downgraded the forecast a little bit, looking like it's going to be 15 to 20 mile per hour sustained winds is the latest from Kevin Roth, weather guy at Roto Grinders. So something to keep in mind. We're not looking at great weather here. Might mean a little bit more running is what we would generally expect with higher winds. Now that's kind of borderline in that 15 to 20 mile per hour range, but we'll get into it as we go. While you're coming in, please like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already done so. Of course, trying to get to 5,000 subscribers by the end of the NFL season. We're getting close. You know, we got another 1,250 left to go, so making progress little by little, but need people to continue to subscribing if I'm going to hit that goal by the end of the NFL season. Of course, going to be going position by position here. Quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, tight ends, defenses, kickers. At the end on this stream, I will be taking any questions you have. You can also ask questions throughout the show. I'll be looking for sure at the end. And of course, I'll play around with some lineups. I'll do a little bit of FanDuel analysis after I've gone through position by position as well. Texas Politics says YouTube did not tell him that I'm live. So I don't know what's going on there. So sorry to hear that. Hopefully people do come in. Looks like we don't have quite the usual viewership right now, but it's not. I don't think it's too far off for the beginning of the stream. So hopefully it was just a little bit delayed there. Hoping that's the case. All right, we're going to be going position by position. I'll start at quarterback as usual, and I'm going to try to be a little bit quicker in this one. I want to get this one done with at least 15 minutes to make my lineups. I've been really putting myself in a bind recently with the way I've been doing these shows, running a little bit long on all my shows and then not giving myself enough time to build. So I'm going to try to give myself a full 15 minutes today. So I'm going to go as quick as I can through the positions that are more straightforward. And quarterback is, of course, one of those positions. Jameis Winston will start there, has the best projection here. He's also cheaper than Russell Wilson. We'll see if the projections held from this morning. So yeah, Russell Wilson, 12% projected cap and ownership. Jameis Winston, 8% projected cap and ownership. To me, with the wind, it's a little bit too high for Russell Wilson at 12%. Honestly, I think I probably just want to like meet in the middle there. Maybe 10% each of Jameis and Russell Wilson feels about right to me. I don't want to go overboard with the quarterbacks because I do have those concerns about weather. I'm not sure how many touchdowns they can score, and quarterbacks are very touchdown dependent. Quarterbacks like these who don't run a lot. So I don't really want to have a ton of either, but I do think 8% for Jameis, given that he's throwing it more than 40 times per game lately. And who knows if that's going to be the case tonight, but they want to throw the ball. So I think Jameis, 10% feels about right. Be a little bit underweight to the field on Russ. Now, it wouldn't surprise me if we do see both of these ownership numbers come down a little bit, just because the weather's getting worse and people are seeing that and maybe don't want to play as much of the quarterbacks. But yeah, I think it's a spot that if I decide that there are other spots that I like better, I would have no issue dropping my quarterback captain ownership. As of right now, I think I'll leave it at, I think I probably want to have about 10% of each, split the difference, have a little bit above the field on Winston, a little bit below the field on Russ. In the flex, we've got Russ coming in at 45% ownership, Jameis coming in at 44.5%. Again, that doesn't feel all that wrong to me. Jameis going to be slinging it. In a vacuum, I prefer Jameis over Russ, I think. And they're coming in about the same ownership. So I might come in a little bit higher on this number for Jameis. But this is kind of a meet the field kind of spot for me. I don't really see anything that's wrong with what the field is doing at quarterback. I think I'll probably have each of these quarterbacks in around half of my lineups. And I'm pretty comfortable with those numbers. I don't want to go overboard. But I also, again, if I end up leaning in on other positions, this is a spot that I could come away from. And then there are like the running backs I like quite a bit. So I might come in a little bit underweight to the field on both quarterbacks with the weather being a concern. Actually, I think that's pretty likely that I come in more like 40% total ownership, 45% total ownership on both of the quarterbacks as I get to other positions more. Scott, this is interesting. Scott says, I think your viewership has to do with FanDuel being down. Can't even enter a contest on there. Can't see upcoming tournaments either. That's interesting. I just saw in a Discord before I started on here, one person that I know who's a big time FanDuel player, was saying that they can't access FanDuel, and then somebody else responded that they could. So I don't know if that's maybe not an issue for everybody. Maybe it's a app versus website thing. I'm not sure. I don't play. I haven't been playing FanDuel lately, so I don't know what's going on there. But sorry to hear that. Hopefully they do fix it before the slate starts. But I'll continue, and hopefully they resolve it by the time I'm done. The only other thing I'll say about these quarterbacks is neither of them runs much. So I would always want to have my quarterback stacked. And if I have them in the captain spot, I want them to be stacked with multiple pass catchers. And the reason for that, and I guess I don't say this on every show. I forget that I get new viewers on this channel pretty regularly. So I do want to say the reasoning for having multiple pass catchers in the flex when I have the quarterback at captain is the scoring dynamics on DraftKings are such that the receiver outscores the quarterback on every passing play because they score a point per reception. They also get more points per yard, more points per touchdown. So with the receiver outscoring the quarterback on every single passing play, the quarterback is going to, the quarterback to be captain obviously has to put up a big score. And they need to put up like big yards, big touchdowns, because they're not scoring as many points per yard and per touchdown. And if they're funneling it to one receiver too much to get those yards and those touchdowns, then that receiver is going to outscore the quarterback because of the scoring dynamics on DraftKings. So generally, and the quarterback is also usually like among the most expensive players on their team. So generally, if the quarterback is going to be optimal at captain and they don't do really anything on the ground, they're going to need to be outscoring their teammates, which means they probably need to be spreading the ball around to put up a big score. So I want both of these quarterbacks. If I have them in at captain, I want them to be at least double stacked. All right, that's going to do it for quarterbacks. I'm going to move on to wide receivers. Running backs. Some of these other positions a little bit more interesting to talk about. I guess I should say just my quick notes on the quarterbacks. Steelers defense has allowed the fewest schedule adjusted fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. So obviously a really tough spot for Jameis Winston. The Browns defense has allowed the 17th most schedule adjusted fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. So just a very middling matchup for Russell Wilson so far this year. But again, the wind also makes things tougher for both quarterbacks. All right, running backs. Wind going with the field, not across. So that's kind of interesting. Okay. Running backs. Going to start with Najee Harris, one of the best projections on the entire slate. Projected for 35% flex ownership. At captain, Najee coming in at 14% ownership. So getting a good amount of ownership going to Najee. I think it's warranted. Again, I think they're going to be running quite a bit. This is a spot where I probably come in above 50% Najee overall, which is, the field's only coming in at right around 49-50%. I think I probably get to 60% Najee, something like that. And I do think I'll probably come in overweight at 14% Najee in the captain spot, and in the flex maybe a little bit overweight 35% also. So yeah, Najee looks great. He's only 9,200, which is pretty cheap for somebody who is the within half a fantasy point of the highest projection on the entire slate. Looks like a fantastic play. Again, I think due to the weather, they're probably going to be running quite a bit in this game. Najee has a great role, 175 carries in 10 games, along with 27 targets. So that's, you can do the math quickly in a 10 gamer. That's 17 and a half carries per game, 2.7 targets per game on 37.7% route participation. Just a pretty nice role for Najee, not like top level elite, but like pretty solid role for Najee. It is worth noting Browns defense has allowed the third fewest schedule adjusted fantasy points per game to running backs. It is a slightly better matchup for running backs on the ground rather than through the air. So as you can see here, it is very bad matchup for running backs, third worst through the air. But then it is, like 12th worst or something like that from for running backs on the ground. So it is, for a running back with Najee's skill set, not the worst possible matchup. But I think that's kind of, I don't know. I'm not factoring that in all that much, the discrepancy there, but a little bit of a, not quite as bad as third worst matchup might suggest for Najee. But overall, I think I'm going to come in a little bit overweight to Najee Harris. I'll continue just with the Steelers first. Jaylen Warren, I'm going to like quite a bit here. He's 6,200. Doesn't project extremely well for a $6,200 player, but he is, 26.5% projected ownership in the flex for Jaylen Warren. And then at captain, 5% ownership. You know, as I just said, it's not the best spot for running backs through the air. But Jalen Warren has a pretty solid role here. Let's see, just over the past, what is this, 4 or 5 games? I think they had a buy in there. Over the past 4 games, Jalen Warren, 44 carries, so 11 carries per game and 12 targets. So 11 carries, 3 targets per game over the past 4 weeks. Honestly, not a bad role. 39% route participation. And then even though it isn't the best matchup for running backs through the air, I also think that this is one where they might just want to be, throwing it short more than usual because of the winds. You don't necessarily want to be throwing it down the field. Now, as somebody noted, it is Steven says that it's the wind is with the field, but wind kind of moves all around anyway. Like it's not going to be, perfect in that way. So I think the wind does affect it a little bit. At least they might be a little bit more inclined to check it down. So it might benefit both running backs, and it might just be a spot where both running backs get a little bit more work, kind of a bigger pie to work with for the running back. So I like Jalen Warren quite a bit, not getting as much ownership as Najee. I don't want to make it sound like I'm like he's not a huge stand for me. I think I'm going to go a little bit overweight on Jalen Warren, both at captain 5% and in the flex. Both those numbers just feel a little bit light to me for Jalen Warren. I think I want to shoot for more like 35-40% Jalen Warren total in my lineups because I think it is a pretty nice spot. Then we do have Cordarrelle Patterson, just 1,000, which is really the only reason that Cordarrelle Patterson is he's only 1,000, and then also not getting much ownership. 6% projected ownership here. Talked to Adam this morning. Other places have Cordarrelle Patterson actually projected for about half of this. I think even less than that in some places. If he came at 6% ownership, I don't think I would try to be above the field, but I might shoot for right around 5 to 6% exposure to Cordarrelle Patterson in my lineups. So then if he does end up coming in at like 2% ownership, I can benefit from that because I think this is a cheap enough price tag at 1,000 that on a slate where we're not expecting there to be much scoring, if he does happen to score a touchdown, just vultures a touchdown from the goal line. If that's it, that might be enough on a really low scoring slate. So I do think 1,000 for Cordarrelle Patterson at low ownership. I'll try to shoot for if you're playing 20 lineups, I would probably play Cordarrelle Patterson in one of those lineups. That is going to be about my approach for Patterson. Does not have any kind of great role here. I'll just bring up his 1 carry in the last game. He did have 3 and 6 in, I guess that was a long time ago when he had those 6 carries, but 4 carries total over the past 2 weeks. Has run a few routes, had 1 target, doesn't have much of a role. But again, this is Arthur Smith offense. Would any of us be shocked if they just put Cordarrelle Patterson in there at the goal line? He's a big, beefy running back, the type that you'd want to put in there at the goal line. So I think Cordarrelle Patterson is somebody you mix in a little bit. About 5% is kind of where I'm aiming for Cordarrelle Patterson. Mike, yes, FanDuel is tripping. People in chat have been talking about that. So not sure what's going on with FanDuel, but yeah, unfortunate there. All right, let's keep going. Talk about the Browns, and I think we will find one of my bigger stands here on the Browns. But we'll start with Nick Chubb. So he's 9,000. Clearly not a great point per dollar play with a projection of just 9.1. You can see Najee Harris projecting for 6 fantasy points better at just 200 better. But as a result of not being a great point per dollar play, Nick Chubb coming in at 25% ownership in the flex. At captain, Nick Chubb coming in at 5% ownership. I think I'm 25% in the flex feels about right. But I think I want to come in a little bit higher than 5% on Chubb at captain. I think that he could see a really big workload here, and it hasn't been awesome so far since he's been back. I'll bring up Chubb here. 53 carries in 4 games though. So what's that? 13 carries per game approximately. So not like a bad role there in terms of carries. He does have 5 targets. So just being targeted about 1 time per game, not running a ton of routes. So you don't really expect much from Nick Chubb in the passing game, but pretty strong role as a runner. The snap share has also been 39.1%. Let's just bring up the game log here. Coaches were asked about the snap share after the game, just 27% last week, 35% the week prior to that. So it's actually been like a declining snap share for Nick Chubb. And actually, let me bring up on my end, I want to read off what was said about Nick Chubb, because the coaches were Stefanski just had a quote about Nick Chubb's snap count and like why that is. So let me pull this up, and I'm pulling up the Coach Speak Index Discord if you wanted to check that out. I think it's like $5 a month, really strong deal. So okay, on the 18th, head coach Kevin Stefanski said was asked why Chubb only played 22 snaps yesterday. He said, just having a plan with these guys, bringing them back, making sure that we're using both guys. The fact that we're playing on Thursday and have a quick turnaround was a factor. So that's kind of interesting. Maybe saw a decrease in snap share as a result of the short week. And who knows what that means for Thursday now. Like, it's still a short week, still 2 games in a short period of time. Maybe they were saving him for this game and they're going to give him a bigger workload here. I'm not sure. I'm not sure that I buy that. But I also think it's interesting that he was asked about Nick Chubb, and I think the response is about both Nick Chubb and Jerome Ford, where he says, just having a plan with these guys, bringing them back, making sure that we're using both guys, sort of indicates to me that they were also maybe holding back Jerome Ford, because he also just came back from an injury for the past 2 games. He missed here, I'll pull it up, missed the first couple games with Nick Chubb, and then came back in week 9. They had their bye in week 10. So week 9, 2 carries, and then you had 5 carries in week 11. Snap share actually pretty good for Jerome Ford, 45% and then 59%. And then 2 targets up to 4 targets. So you might get, from what I'm saying here, I'm going to have a lot of interest in Jerome Ford tonight. I think Jerome Ford looks pretty great. He's been really good throughout the year. Nick Chubb has not been. Jerome Ford has been the far more efficient back. And you can see he's not getting a ton of ownership because we're projecting it as though Nick Chubb is the lead back and Jerome Ford is more like the third down back. And I'm just not convinced that that's necessarily the case. 1% projected captain ownership for Jerome Ford. This is probably going to be my biggest stand of the slate, is I'm going to be well over the field on Jerome Ford, both at captain and in the flex. So, Jaylen Warren, I want to make clear that I wasn't taking a huge stand, but Jerome Ford, I think that I am going to take kind of a big stand here. He's only 4,400, 16% projected ownership in the flex. He's like the clear passing down back. So, if they get a big lead, it's possible that Nick Chubb is just the guy that they give it to over and over, but Chubb isn't even better on the ground, I think. So, Steven says Chubb's last 3 were all against great defenses. He has done as well as most against those teams. That's fair. But he has another tough defense. I actually don't remember who he played. I guess I can look that here. The last 3, New Orleans, not a great defense at all. So that's not true. Chargers pretty good. Philadelphia has been very good recently. I guess that's not here. I'll pull up Chubb. Baltimore's tough against the run. Cincinnati, not a super tough defense. And New Orleans, a pretty soft defense. So I don't know that I would agree with that statement, that it's been really tough defenses for Nick Chubb. I think that we kind of expected coming into this year that it was going to take a little while for Nick Chubb to get up to full speed. And I just don't think that he's there yet. Maybe I'm wrong. Blasphemy. What did I say? That was blasphemy. Is one of these defenses better than I'm giving him credit for? Maybe it is. But again, I think, Nick Chubb, I think that he's going a little bit under owned at captain, but Jerome Ford, I think he might be better than Nick Chubb right now. I think that the coaches are sort of indicating that they want it to be a split backfield. And I'm just not convinced that the projections are projecting it correctly. I think there's some volatility here in the just base case. And then I think if Cleveland does get down, they're more likely to throw it to Jerome Ford. And it's, with the heavy winds, maybe just more likely to have shorter passes that a check down running back could benefit from. So overall, I just think that it's a pretty nice spot for Jerome Ford at 4,400 when not a lot of the field is going to be on him. So I do think that this is a spot where I'm going to be, at least double the field and much more than that at captain. Maybe much more than that. It's like, I'll probably get to like 8% or 5, maybe not even 8%, 5% would be, close to 5x the field on Jerome Ford at captain. But yeah, I think he just looks like a fantastic play. I'm going to get to a lot of Jerome Ford. Probably not going to get to much Pierre Strong. I think he's up, mix him in a 150 set. I think that's probably the approach I'll take to Pierre Strong, getting 2.5% ownership, and he's only 400. So doesn't take much to pay it off. So I think I'll mix him in, but not going to have a ton there. All right. Oh, you're saying that Ford is better on the ground, or you're saying that I don't know. Okay. All right. Let's see. Okay, yeah, this is true. So he says, Crutcher says, to be fair, last first game back with Cincinnati, then two of the hardest matchups. Then the last game against weaker New Orleans, he actually did do well. So yeah, that's fair. He did better in the better matchups there before the game got away from him. Okay, I get what you're saying now. Okay, but regardless, I think Jerome Ford is serviceable on the ground, even if you disagree that he's better than Nick Chubb at this point, and then clearly the better passing down back. So I think there's value there. I think it might be a closer split than what is being projected. I'm not like super confident in that, but I think at 4,400, I don't necessarily need to be right about that. I think that even if it is the split that is being kind of projected as, I think it's possible that there's just a big enough pie that 4,400 Jerome Ford can pay off. So that's a stand that I'm going to be taking. You can follow me on it if you want to, or not. But I think that it's a good bet there. And then Pierre Strong, like I said, just mixing into a 150 set. All right, that is all of the. Let me read off real quickly the schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed for the running backs. I guess I already did that for the Steelers side of it. I'll read off the Brown side of it as well. Or no, I did it for the Brown side of it. Yeah, Brown's defense has allowed the third fewest schedule adjusted fantasy points per game to running backs, but it's not quite as bad for running backs on the ground. And then the Steelers defense has allowed the 13th most schedule adjusted fantasy points. Nope, I read that wrong. No, it is. I was reading the wrong line, but it's the same number. 13th fewest schedule adjusted fantasy points per game to running backs. So a slightly negative matchup for the Browns running backs, but not like a super terrible one. It's not bottom barrel there. Okay. Move on to wide receivers. All right, let me move this. It's going to start with George Pickens, the one clear alpha here. And he projects very well. The highest projection of any wide receiver by 3.5 fantasy points. He's also 11,000. So very expensive, kind of hard to get to. George Pickens, 36% ownership in the flex. Captain coming in at 14% ownership. Honestly, that number feels kind of fair to me. I think George Pickens, he's going to be pretty boom bust in general, I think. But 14% is probably about right for George Pickens. Not a spot where I'm going to take a huge stand. Certainly can put up a huge score that you really want to have. But what is it? About 50% total ownership going to George Pickens. I'm not taking any major stand there. His role has been pretty great, in particular with Russell Wilson. And let me double check on the game log, which actual games we're seeing here. I'll pull it up. So this is, I think it's just 3 games. Yeah, four starts with Russ ever since week 7. So maybe I've already got that here. Yep, week 7 here. So you can see in 4 games with Russell Wilson, 33 targets for George Pickens. So just over 8 targets per game, 87% route participation. They seem to have pretty good chemistry. They've been doing pretty well. So yeah, I think around 50% George Pickens feels about right. I think that is a pretty strong number. Sean wants to know who is the slot on both teams. Let's see. On the Steelers over the past 4 weeks. Pull it up. Calvin Austin. Calvin Austin has been running from the slot for the Steelers. On the Browns, and I'll start my Browns analysis now. Elijah Moore has been running the most from the slot. So they actually both do have, receivers who do way more from the slot. A lot of times it's like even the top ones are like right around 50%. These are actual slot receivers here. So good note there. But I'll continue on with the Steelers side first. So George Pickens, I think around 50% ownership feels about right. 14% captain ownership seems totally reasonable to me. After Pickens, we have Calvin Austin is the wide receiver 2. George Pickens is far and away the top receiver, as you can see in the projection. The wide receiver 2, but he only projects for 5.4 fantasy points. He is one of the top values on the slate. If you just search point per dollar. Calvin Austin shows up as, I guess I can do it here. I mean, Kadarius Toney, I guess, because he's 200, but Calvin Austin shows up as the second best wide receiver here. Looks like a really strong point per dollar play. Not getting a ton of ownership, 15.5%. Kind of feels fine. I don't think I would play Calvin Austin at captain, but I think 15.5% in the flex is probably about the right number for Calvin Austin. Like, just doesn't have a great role, and we can take a look at it here. In 4 games with Russell Wilson, Calvin Austin has 15 targets, so less than 4 targets per game, 60.1% route participation. I don't know. He even as a wide receiver too does not have a great role. He can house one like just on a short pass. He could do the Kevontae Turpin thing. So I think he's playable. But it's a very similar play to what we had with Kevontae Turpin, which at ownership I did not love. But I know a lot of sharp people were on it. So I think it's fine. I don't think that I'm taking any major stand on Calvin Austin. About 15.5% is probably around where I'm aiming to get there. Beyond Calvin Austin, so we have Van Jefferson. We have, let me sort by fantasy points here. Van Jefferson, Mike Williams, and Ben Skowronek. And I'll pull up just all the Steelers here. Sort by route participation. So Van Jefferson over the past 4 games, 65.2% route participation. He has just under 3 targets per game. He also lost a little bit of that route participation last week, and I don't really want to read too much into a 1-game sample, but it is sort of interesting that he just ran 51.2% of the routes last week. I don't know. I'm not that concerned about it, but it's a slight concern if you just look at the route participation. And I'll pull it up here. Steelers route participation is probably the easier way to see it. So Pickens remaining very solid. Van Jefferson, like he's been pretty high most of the year, 70-ish%, and then drops down to 51% last week. Calvin Austin, not far above that, 53.7%. So I guess maybe it was just a game script thing. I don't know exactly what happened there. Maybe they're running more 2 tight end sets, but I'm not really seeing that. Mike Williams, I guess, increased his route participation just a little bit. That was his second game with the Steelers. I don't know what to make of the fact that both Van Jefferson and Calvin Austin's route participation dropped, and we didn't really see a drastic increase for anybody else. I guess Ben Skowronek saw a little bit more. So maybe that was a factor. I think it's just a small sample size thing that I'm not super concerned about. At low ownership, I think fine plays. I would guess that I come in overweight to 4% Van Jefferson, but not by a ton. Like maybe I get to 6%, something like that, just because I'm trying to leave salary on the table. He's a value salary saving option, capable of breaking a big one. He's out there for more than 50% of the routes. So I think I probably do get a little bit above weight to 4%, but honestly don't have any like super strong reason to go there. Ben Skowronek getting virtually 0 ownership. He's 200. He's a fine tournament dart throw, I think. Nothing more than that. Just kind of you're hoping for a touchdown. Maybe at 200, just like a single 30-yard reception would be enough for Ben Skowronek. He's cheap enough. So I think that I want to get to 1%, 2% Ben Skowronek, but not taking any kind of major stand there. And then Mike Williams, 11% is, I don't know, that's a bit much, in my opinion. That's probably more than he should be. I don't know that ownership is warranted on Mike Williams. I didn't reading the Coach Speak Index on Mike Williams wasn't super positive to me. It seems okay. I'll read it off to you. So it's just a couple days ago. Mike Tomlin said he's excited about continuing to get to know Mike Williams more and how he might be able to help us and infusing him more into what it is that we do. I like his work. How we feel about his progress is not always reflected in statistics. We'll keep working. He's doing a great job fitting in. I like the trajectory. And then he was asked whether he sees Williams getting a higher share of snaps. And he said, "We'll see, man. It just really is week to week from a matchup perspective of how we put our plan together." So I don't know that there was no like, yes, we want to get him more involved. It was a, we'll see week to week. Maybe he'll get more snaps. So 11% seems a bit much for a player who, since he joined the Steelers, has not really been playing much. I think he has 1 total target over those two games. It was for a touchdown, so that's worth something. But just I think it's like 27% route participation over the course of those 2 weeks. I don't know, not a great role, but he's an obvious end zone target. I think he's essentially a touchdown or bust type of play. But I think he's a fine touchdown or bust type of play at it's 3,200. Yeah, probably coming in underweight to 11% on Mike Williams. That seems a bit much to me, just given the price tag. Like, he doesn't even necessarily pay it off with a touchdown. So I think I'd be a little bit light, 11% there. No huge issue there. All right, on the Cleveland side, it is. I'm just going to do all of them together because I'm going to at least the top three. We've got Cedric Tillman, Jerry Jeudy, Elijah Moore, and they all have pretty similar roles. So we'll take a quick look at the ownership for each. So in the flex, we've got Tillman coming in at 34%, Jeudy coming in at 34%. So they're coming in basically the exact same ownership, with Jeudy being $1,000 more expensive and actually projecting. I mean, they basically project identically. So it's interesting that they have identical projections, identical ownership projections, and Jeudy is 1,000 more. So that makes me like Tillman a little bit better than Jerry Jeudy, just looking at those numbers, if they end up being correct. And then Elijah Moore projects a little bit worse than both of them, but also coming in a little bit lower owned, about 10% lower owned, and he's only 6,400. And we can take a look at the coverage matchup. I've already got it pulled up. That's convenient. Cedric Tillman has the best coverage grade matchup on the Browns. Jerry Jeudy not far behind, and then bad matchups for David Njoku, Elijah Moore, Jordan Akins. We also looked at it earlier. Joey Porter Jr. is being projected to shadow Jerry Jeudy, so factor that in as you may. I think that is going to be a negative there, but still, looks like it's a strong coverage grade. But also, if he does get shadowed by Joey Porter Jr., maybe that's a slight negative for by Joey Porter Jr. Maybe a slight negative for Jerry Jeudy. Let's just take a look over the past. Is this the right sample? I think this might be too many games here. Yeah, this is. Let me go week 8 to when Jameis started. So this is in 3 games with Jameis Winston. Look at how close this is. Jerry Jeudy, 29 targets. Elijah Moore, 28 targets. Cedric Tillman, 27 targets. And it's Jeudy leads in route participation. Elijah Moore, third of the 3 at 76%, and then Cedric Tillman at 89%. To me, Elijah Moore stands out as probably my favorite option of the group. I'd say Jerry Jeudy is like pretty clearly my third option of the group at the very least, which I'd say that, and like it's almost just as likely. I think it's kind of a throw your hands up situation as far as who does well in this game. But Jeudy is the most expensive and basically tied for the most ownership. So just as a result of that, I'm probably going to be a little bit underweight to the field on Jeudy. Tillman, as we saw, has the best coverage grade. He's only 7,000, so I like him. I think he looks better than Jeudy. And then Elijah Moore, I think, just looks the best. He's doesn't project as well, but he is getting a lot of targets. He's not running quite as many routes, but then I think the difference in salary and projection overall, because he's getting lower owned at a lower salary, Elijah Moore looks the best to me. And then at captain, I think it's actually pretty similar. I think all 3 are viable captain options, but Jeudy again getting 7% ownership at captain, Elijah Moore just 3.5%. So I'd rather get to Elijah Moore there, and then Tillman up at 10.5%. I wanted to be enthusiastic about Tillman at captain. I'm not really enthusiastic about 10.5%. I think that is maybe a fine number, but not something that I really want to get above weight to that. Whereas Elijah Moore, I think at 3.5%, I want to get above weight to that number. I think like the Jeudy and Tillman seem okay. I don't have any real issue with it, but I'm not like enthusiastically trying to get above weight to those numbers. And then Kadarius Toney, Jamari Thrash, only like mix them into a 150 set if you want. They're going to get low enough ownership that they're viable, but not super exciting. 0% ownership being projected for Jamari Thrash. Where is Tony? Is he in here? Maybe he's not even projected. He hasn't really done much. I don't think I see him in here. Yeah, he's not in there. Either way, like both of them are just tournament dart throws at best if you're playing like a 150 set. All right, I'm going to check in on comments and then move on to tight ends, see if you had any questions about any of these wide receivers. Michael asks, do you think a quarterback in single entry is necessary? I wouldn't say necessary at all. No, I'll definitely have plenty of lineups with no quarterbacks in them tonight, and I think that's fine in single entry. Yes, I mean, he's being projected, according to fantasy points, he's expected to shadow Jerry Jeudy. Yes, we're expecting 15 to 20 mile per hour winds. Actually, let me see if he is. Maybe he's updated on here. It's actually a new feature in Lineup HQ is latest model put winds. Yeah. So I'll just read off. This is Kevin Roth says, rain and snow is extremely likely, potentially all game long. Latest models put winds around 15 to 20 miles per hour, sustained with gusts 25 to 30 miles per hour. I do view this as a downgrade to passing, not because they can't throw in this weather. There should still be plenty of passing, but because teams may be a bit more run heavy in wet weather than they otherwise would be. Which, sounds about right to me. Like it should be a downgrade to the passing game. It's a little bit tougher to throw if it is, heavy winds. So yeah, slight downgrade to the passing game there. All right, I didn't scroll up far enough apparently, so apologies for that. But I don't think I'm going to scroll all the way up because I don't want to get that far. All right, I'm going to stop here. Let's see, because I got plenty of questions. Marco asks, this is an ugly slate, and it's being a low scoring total. How much should we leave to be contrarian? Is playing both defenses crazy? Not at all crazy to play both defenses. I'm probably leaving $1,000 like it's going to be. So like at least $1,000 left will probably be my max, something around there. Let's see. Agree with Crutches on this. Agree. Yeah. Right. Exact same page there. Okay. I think it's fine if you want to stack all. I mean, I probably won't have a lot of all four running backs, but I think that is totally fine. Like in a 150 set, I'll probably get to some lineups that have all four. I don't have a min one running back rule. I don't set that kind of rule in general. I don't set many rules, to be honest, other than like quarterback correlations is the only rule that I am very adamant about. Sometimes I'll set other rules, but yeah, nothing like that. You could if you wanted to, and like if you're playing 20 lineups or something, totally fine. Yeah, we talked about FanDuel. I see a lot of you talking about FanDuel. Man, that sucks. It affected NBA already. All right, let's see. Andre says Kelvin Austin is the key to the slate. I mean, could be. I mean, just like Kevontae Turpin was, definitely could be. What's up, Mario? Yeah, good call out there, Dan. Please do like the video if you haven't already done so. Yeah, I think the short routes, I mean, that's generally going to be the slot receivers. So Kelvin Austin and Elijah Moore. Let's see. I think, Sean, I gave you Moore's ownership after you asked that question. All right, I'm scrolling quickly now. All right. Yeah, don't forget to get into some pick six or underdog stuff if you want to play those pick'ems. Remember to get those in. I often forget to do those. I did a couple today. All right, I'm scrolling. Oh, I'm seeing Kadarius Toney is apparently on the practice squad. People are saying. Yeah, this is a good question from Michael. I sort of regret. I took the over on 5.5 kicking points for I'm blanking on his name now. The Cleveland kicker, and now I'm sort of regretting it, but I'm not that concerned about it. But yeah, it could affect the kicking for sure if it is straight in line with the field instead of cross field. Could be even helpful potentially, but yeah, I don't think it's generally going to be a good thing. Yeah, exactly. I think it makes it worse for the kickers generally. Yeah, Hopkins, that's right. So I took the over on 5.5, and I'm okay with it, but I don't feel that great about there being big wins. Okay, I'm going to move on to tight ends. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already done so. Would appreciate. I keep on forgetting to turn on subscribers only chat, but we haven't had any. Maybe it's my moderators are doing a good job, but I have not seen any major bots in here, so that's helpful. Okay, moving on to tight ends. Right, I got through them all. Yes, I did them all. Okay, David Njoku, top projected tight end by a country mile. 7,600 looks really good. Um, I like Njoku, and I just did the analysis of all the wide receivers, so I'll just bring this back up. In 3 games with Jameis, 23 targets. 9 of those came in the last game, which I think is promising, kind of a positive trend for David Njoku, and kind of what I was expecting, because I do think that he is their best receiving option. I think that he's a strong yards after the catch guy, which I think is a good thing to be in a windy game where maybe they want to throw it short and let the receiver go to work. I think David Njoku could benefit from his yards after the catch ability here. So 77% route participation, right in line with Elijah Moore, a little bit lower than Tillman and Judy, but 23 targets over the past 3 games. Yeah, I think it's a good game for Njoku. I like him in the captain spot. He was coming in. Let me bring that back up. Projected for 6% captain ownership. I want to come in over that number on Njoku, just kind of hoping that they try to pepper their best receiving option like they did late last year with Joe Flacco. Like I think that could happen. Maybe Jameis a little bit more willing to throw it short to the tight end in this game. So I like 6% ownership. I'm going to come in overweight to that number at captain for Njoku. And then the flex projected for 28% ownership. Again, I like him better than Judy for sure. Um, I might like him better than any of the receivers. Elijah Moore, it's kind of debatable because Moore's coming in even lower ownership and cheaper. But I think Njoku could be my favorite of the pass catching option. I think that I want to be over 28% in the flex. I want to be over 6% at cap. And I think those numbers look really strong. Like I want to be at least over 40% David Njoku total ownership. Going to be somewhat of a stand for me. Not like a huge stand, but I think those numbers look pretty low to me. And I am going to get a good amount of Njoku. Not a bad spot. The Steelers defense has allowed the 13th most schedule adjusted fantasy points per game to tight end. So one of the few like above average spots. So yeah, overall, I think they're probably going to throw it more than the Steelers are. The weather obviously doesn't help anybody, but maybe it's a little bit more likely that they just throw it short to Njoku and let him go to work. So at pretty low ownership, I think Njoku looks like a really strong play. Outside of Njoku, we have, oh, hang on, I'm in the wrong spot here. Jordan Akins looks like a pretty strong play. He's only 1,600, decent role. Of course, he has 8 targets over the past 3 games, but that is with Jameis just chucking it. So, relative to the other receiving options, still just a 6% target share, but more than 2 targets per game, nearly 3 targets per game over the past 3 games for Jordan Akins. 23% route participation. I think he looks like a fine play. He is getting a little bit of ownership, 8.5%. That seems about right to me. I don't think I'm taking any major stand there. I probably come in a little bit overweight to that, but yeah, not taking any like huge stand there. But my guess is I'll come in a little bit higher than 8.5%, just because as far as backup tight ends go, I think he's on the better end of that scale. I think he's a little bit more likely to score that touchdown and maybe add another catch or two where you really want to have him, and he's pretty cheap. So yeah, I think Akins looks like a pretty strong play. I don't think there were any other tight ends that I was playing yet. I think Jeff Swain was actually inactive, so we don't have to worry about him, which I guess also makes Jordan Akins look better, a little bit more secure in his role. On the other side, we have Pat Fryermuth, Darnell Washington, and then you consider playing Connor Hayward. Not much going on there, but Fryermuth and Washington both look pretty good. And again, we'll go back to week 7 here. So this is games with Russ. In terms of route participation, you have Fryermuth coming in at 65.9% route participation in 4 games with Russell Wilson, just 9 targets. So just over 2 targets per game in the 4 games with Russell Wilson. That doesn't look great, but then he's only 3,600, only getting 15% ownership. Just from a, I don't know, maybe it's IKBing it a little bit. Those numbers seem just a little bit light to me. Because he's I think a pretty good tight end. Maybe Russ figures that out at some point, start targeting him a little bit more. He hasn't had that great of a role this year, but I think he's better than he has shown with Russ. So I think I probably come in over 15% there again. He's running so many routes, maybe like similar to Njoku, like maybe the wind just he sees the ball a little bit more, a few more short passes to Pat Fryermuth over the center of the field. So I think Fryermuth looks like a strong play at 15%. That does feel like somebody that I want to be above weight to. But then the interesting thing is you also have Darnell Washington there, who actually has a higher target share over the past in the 4 games with Russ. Darnell Washington 11 targets to Fryermuth's 9, and there are actually several of them are first read targets. Check that out. Yeah, 10 first read. 10 of the 11 targets he's seen have been first read targets according to fantasy points trackers. So they're going out of their way to get the ball to Darnell Washington 2 or 3 times per game since Russell Wilson joined the team. They've had some success with him, and it's been like kind of consistent his workload recently as opposed to early in the season. I know we've talked about this if you've been watching these shows, but it's you just look at early in the season, the route participation was like, low 20s ish. And then we saw kind of a big jump, and it's been pretty consistently. We had this one game, an outlier here, but mostly like 30-ish% route participation. And then he does have 3 or more targets in 3 of the 4 games with Russell Wilson, just one game with a single target. But pretty strong usage for Darnell Washington, and promising that 10 of them were first read targets. So I think he looks like a pretty strong play. And only getting 5.5% ownership. I'm not sure if I believe that number on Darnell Washington, but I like it. I think that it's, even if he does come in at 10% ownership, I might want to be even slightly above the field there. So I think Darnell Washington looks like a pretty strong play. Maybe you could even consider him my captain. Let's see what's the ownership here. At 0.2%, I think he's worth considering just for hope for a touchdown and a couple other catches. Not a super strong option, but maybe I'll have a share or two in a 150 set, something like that. And then Connor Hayward, I can't say I'm excited to play any Connor Hayward. He did kind of bite me on this showdown slate against Dallas when he randomly had 4 targets, and I think maybe scored a touchdown or at least had an end zone target. And I was unsure what was going on because every other game this year, 0 to 1 target. I don't know what happened that game. 6 routes, 4 targets in that game randomly. Were they first read targets? Just curious now. Yeah, 3 of the 4 were first read targets. I'm not enthused about playing Connor Hayward, but at 0% ownership, again, just if you're playing 150, you could mix him in just a little bit, getting less than 1% ownership in the flex. All right, I think that does it for tight ends. So we can move on, talk about kickers and defenses. Actually, I'll just look at RG for this. Actually, let me check in on chat and I'll move this brand down. 56%. Well, I mean, you're not playing that many lineups, so not as crazy when you're not playing 150 to go really heavy. All right. Scrolling up, seeing if I'm missing any questions here. Paul is fading most of the pass catchers. Yeah, I think that's definitely a reasonable stand to take. It'll be interesting because I think most people are going to play this for like not a great passing game. I think most people are going to play it through the ground, which is what I'm inclined to do. But I guess it's not really being projected like that though. Like the pass catchers are getting some projected ownership, so maybe not everybody is factoring in weather, that kind of stuff. So I do think it's a fun game to attack. Hopefully the ownership doesn't get crazy high on the runners. All right. Since Pickens is diva, does he have cold weather split? Oh God, I don't know. I don't know if I know Pickens's cold weather splits. Is that, can I see that in the data suite? That's an interesting split to look at. I doubt I'm going to be able to find that in the data suite, but let's see. Split game team. You can find most things in the data suite. I also just might not be able to. Defensive matchups. I don't think it'll be play. Yeah, it's not going to be there. Match location. Maybe this year. Let's see. Favorite underdog over under. Temperature. Temperature. All right, let's do it. Okay, I'm going to do custom from negative 50 degrees to what? What's the temperature today? I mean, it's all right. I'm going to do up to 50%. Or sorry, 50 degrees. Oh, it's 35 today. I'll do up to 40 degrees because 50 is not actually that cold. All right, I'm going to do negative 50 up to 40. I'm guessing he's not played in any negative 50 degree games, but let's see. Oh, okay. I need to change the splits here. All right. So far I just have, this is for 2024. I'm guessing not going to have any. I can't do multiple seasons at a time. Let's see 2023 though. All right. In sub 40 degree games, last year played 3 games, 15 targets. So that's just 5 targets per game last year on 88.4% row participation. So this is just usage stats. So I don't know if you wanted, let's see, fantasy points. Not great. So 4.2 fantasy points per game in cold weather last year. Take a look at 2022. Oh, this looks better. 2022, he played 3 games in cold weather, 17.1 fantasy points per game. So seems like was fine a couple of years ago. So maybe not a huge factor. All right. I'm gonna clear this. All right. Kickers and defenses. Let's see. In the flex, and I think we'll actually have to look at captain for kickers and defenses too. Steelers projecting for 25.5% ownership. Browns projecting for 16% ownership. No issue with the Steelers number, and I really like that Browns number. Steelers coming in at 3.5% captain ownership. Browns coming in at just under 2% captain ownership. I think that I like those numbers on all of them. Like I think I come in overweight to 3.5% Steelers defense in the captain spot. I think they're just such a strong defense, and Jameis threw 31 interceptions a few years ago. Like he just throws so many interceptions. Above 40, people are saying 41 degrees now. Yeah, maybe I could go up to like 45 or something, see if maybe that captures a few more games. But I think that the Steelers defense looks great. Like I really like them both at captain and in the flex. And then the Browns defense to me actually looks like great. Like I think they're cheaper. It's a home game. I'll go up to 40. I'm debating like, is 48 cold enough? Let's go 40, 46. It's kind of random, but I think that's a good number. Capture, this game in a little bit more warmer for a larger sample size. All right, I'm guessing Pickens has not played. Actually, I'm just going to go Steelers in general. Okay, the Steelers haven't played in any cold games yet this year. In 2023, and we'll just look at all of them. Pickens, 4.9 fantasy points per game in 4 games. Pat Freiermuth, last year, 7.8 fantasy points per game in 3 games. Calvin Austin, 2.7. I mean, obviously different roles for some of them. 2022. Pickens, 14 fantasy points per game in 6 games. So fine, not phenomenal. Freiermuth 8.2. Doesn't seem like it has really affected them all that much. Maybe I should do also not negative 50. Maybe I should do like, because that's like, this isn't actually that cold. Even like 30, like there's a big difference between some of these numbers. So now we're down to 5 games when it's like sort of cold. Pickens, 13.4 in 5 games in 2022. Frymouth 7.2. Yeah, so it doesn't seem to be a big impact from what I'm seeing. But again, I think Steelers defense at 3.5% at captain. I like that. I'm going to be definitely overweight to that number. At like 24% in the flex, I'm going to be overweight to that number too. I think it's just a great defense in a phenomenal spot against Jameis Winston, who in his best season when he was just crushing things, through 31 interceptions. Like, it's just a great spot for the Steelers defense. For the Browns defense, they're kind of inexpensive. They're only 4,000. They're also, I think, a pretty strong defense playing at home. Russell Wilson not nearly as turnover prone, but I think that they're still in a pretty good spot in a bad weather game and not getting nearly as much ownership. So I like both defenses quite a bit. Okay. And then the kickers, I think, it's a concern. I think that it is pretty windy here today. They're not getting crazy high ownership. Let's see. We have Dustin Hopkins coming in at 20%. Like, I actually think that I don't want to be there. Like, this is a spot where I might actually want to be underweight to Dustin Hopkins at 20%. Boswell at 18%. I think I'm fine with that number. I'm not taking any huge stands on kickers, but if you wanted to fade them, like, I think this is probably a better spot than most to do it. But also, kickers on a showdown slate obviously going to bury you if you fade them. So got to factor in that it is a showdown slate. Joking. Okay. FanDuel, I'm just going to take a brief look because I know some of you want to see it. Where are we? There we go. At MVP, Russell Wilson getting 18%. Najee Harris at 16%. I actually really like that number on FanDuel. That looks really strong to me. Jameis Winston, 13%. That seems fine. Najee standing out to me among the higher owned as somebody I'd probably want to be above weight to. Pickens at 12% seems pretty good. I think I want to be above that. And then a big drop down. Nick Chubb, just 6%, feels pretty good at MVP on FanDuel. I think he could definitely be the highest scoring player on the slate. Again, Steelers defense, I think, could just be the highest scoring play. So 4% ownership on FanDuel looks pretty good. I like the Njoku ownership at 4%. Even Browns, 2.5%. I think that looks like a strong play there. I think it is like, it's a better day than usual to play non-studs at MVP on FanDuel. Like, usually I try to find players that have slate breaking upside, and just stick to a few at FanDuel MVP. I think this is one where you could go like Jerry Jeudy at 4% or Tillman at 5%. Like, this does not look like, and the ownership is kind of reflecting that it's much flatter than it usually is. And yeah, not much is really standing out to me. But the ones that do stand out are like Njoku looks pretty strong to me on FanDuel. Chubb looks pretty strong to me. Najee looks a little bit underowned. George Pickens, those ones kind of stand out to me as some of my favorite MVP plays. And then in the flex, Najee at 30%, again, feels pretty good. 27% Chubb seems fine. 25% Pickens, that's low. He's only 13.5. Like, that's good price tag. I like that number quite a bit. 24% Steelers defense looks great. 18% Njoku, that is awesome. Browns defense at just 16%, great play. And then you've got, let's see, Darnell Washington at sub 3% on FanDuel. Yeah, I like that quite a bit. Jerome Ford, again, just 12% on FanDuel, only 8,000. Like, that looks awesome. And then, of course, yeah, Elijah Moore, 18.5% seems pretty good. Jalen Warren, 21% seems fine. Yeah. All right. I think that does it for FanDuel. I'm going to check in on questions, and I'm going to try and play some lineups. All right, let's see. Oh, that's a good point. Brandon says, Neil is too dumb to realize that you'd have to compare how a player does on warm weather to how they do on cold weather for that analysis to matter. You need a control. But I know how they do, like, in an average game, Brandon. That's why I'm not going to I don't have time to do both. All right. Let's see. Ownership on Darnell Washington was like 5.5%. I'm not sure I buy that, though. I think it's going to come in higher than that. All right, I'm scrolling. All right, so FanDuel is at least letting you upload something there. Oh no. All right, we did get some bots here. All right, scrolling. Fade of the day. Probably the quarterbacks is probably the spot that I'm going to be underweight to the most, probably on both sites, which I don't feel that great about, but yeah, I imagine I'll be a little bit underweight to the quarterbacks. I'll see if I can think of anybody else that I'm like Judy. I'll probably be underweight to. Who else? I'm trying to remember who else I like at this point. Mike Williams, I'm definitely underweight to if he comes in at 11%. Yeah, I think those are the ones that immediately come to mind. We'll see. All right. Starting at captain, I'm going to go with, where do I want to go here? Let's just try a Najee captain lineup. I think Najee looks great. I'm going to throw in, I don't think I'm going to play 4 running backs in this one. Oh, I put him in the flex. Didn't mean to do that. All right, Najee at captain. Now you could, like, the obvious thing to do here is to immediately put the Steelers defense in there when you have Najee at captain. I think that it makes sense. So let's just do that. Could be a both defenses kind of game. Now we have a lot of salary to play with. I like Jerome Ford quite a bit, so let's try that. And now we have all the salary to play with. Now it could just do like Pickens and Russ, and I think that's probably fine, leaving 1,400 on the table. So playing just one of the quarterbacks here, Russ with Pickens. Got Ford with the Browns defense, Harris with the Steelers defense. Just looks like a pretty classic, like bad weather type lineup. Leaving 14 on the table, I don't think it will be duped too much. You've got, one of the highest projected players in the captain spot. I think this looks like a pretty strong lineup for today. I would think it will be duped some, just because every part of this lineup is going to get a fair amount of ownership. But Ford is actually not getting that much ownership, so that brings it down a little bit. Browns defense not getting that much ownership, so maybe not duped that much when you consider leaving 1,400 on the table. But I think that looks pretty good. All right, what else? Checking on comments. Priced him above the number 2. Wait, what? All right. All right, I'm not seeing any comments or questions. So I'm going to do one more. I did see somebody asking about doing a FanDuel lineup, which maybe I'll do that in a second. Let me try a Jerome Ford. No, I'm going to do David Njoku captain lineup. I think I will just do the obvious thing, throw Winston here because we have plenty of salary. I think I can still do Jerome Ford in here. I like the idea of playing Winston and the Steelers defense. So even though I do like the Browns defense quite a bit, I'm going to throw the Steelers defense in this one to get a little bit different. Now I think he could go to, I'll go Elijah Moore. So now we've got we got Winston with 2 pass catchers and now 12,800 left. I'll just throw Pickens in here, leaves 1,800 on the table. So this is obviously just for a large field GPP, like the largest field GPP. But I think this makes sense for a large field GPP. You've got the correlation of Winston with Njoku. Njoku has the biggest game, Moore a little bit cheaper, doesn't need that much to pay it off. Ford, just a strong value at 4,400. Now, every spot in this lineup, because I'm leaving 1,800 on the table, you have to look at it like, okay, so who else could I have gotten instead of Winston? Just Russell Wilson. I'm making the bet that Winston outscores him. I'm making the bet that everybody up to that Jerome Ford outscores everybody up to 6,200. So I'm making the assumption that Jerome Ford outscores Jalen Warren. There aren't that many. Chris Boswell, Dustin Hopkins, Browns defense, whatever. So I think that's totally reasonable bet to make. Steelers defense has to outscore everybody up to 7,200. So they need to outscore Cedric Tillman, Jalen Warren. Totally reasonable, I think, for that to be the case. Elijah Moore has to outscore everybody up to 8,200. So now we need Elijah Moore to outscore Jerry Jeudy and Tillman. I think that he could be the highest scoring of the receivers on the Browns. So I have no issue with that. I think that this looks like a strong large field GPP lineup. Let me see if I can even access FanDuel because it sounds like everybody's having issues. I don't even know if I have money on this. I think I do. I think I do have some money on the site. Yeah, I do. Good. Let's see. All right, here we go. Oh, and that's not working. So I don't think, let me refresh once. Yep, not working. So sorry, I cannot make a FanDuel lineup. I was trying to get out of here with 15 minutes to spare, and I've got about 15 minutes left. I'm trying to read the comments, questions. Yeah, I would definitely consider a Chubb captain lineup. I think he's going under-owned at captain. So I definitely think Chubb looks like a pretty strong captain option. Yeah, Njoku captain, he's one of my favorites. Just because he's coming in pretty low owned. All right. Let's see. I'm trying to figure out the remaining salary of L2 matchups in 2023 week 11, 5,800, week 2, 14,600. You're saying that in those weeks, that's how much money was left on the table in the winning lineups? I don't know. Okay. Wait, I'll answer this question real quick. If I can end up switching, would you play Tillman or Steelers D on FanDuel in the flex? Really depends on the rest of your lineup. But probably Steelers defense, just, in a vacuum. I'd say Steelers defense. For these two teams. Okay. Interesting. So those are the two matchups that they played, and a lot of salary left on the table. So that's a good note. So in the Showdown slate last year for this, a lot of salary was left on the table. Obviously, you don't want to take too much from historical data, but that's kind of in line with what I was thinking. So good note there. All right. If you have not already subscribed to the channel, would appreciate it. Trying to get to 5,000 subscribers by the end of the NFL season. So your support is very much appreciated. If you would like the video, hit the notification bell if you want to get notifications when I go live. Of course, if you've not already joined the Flannelverse Discord, you can find the link in the description of this video. A lot of good conversations happening there. Remember to do your flash drafts tonight. Should be a fun one. Let's go. Let's win some money. Thanks, guys. And I will catch you on this channel on Sunday.